Well, here it is, the day that days we've all been waiting for. Or maybe not. U of M versus the NCAA in a courtroom, in a room in Indianapolis. Sorry if I'm not exactly sure, what the room looks like there, the U-shaped table, Michigan with their folks that are accompanying them to Indianapolis, the Committee on Infractions, and they'll go point by point right now over the next couple hours, maybe right now, and then they'll also do it tomorrow if need be. I think it would be good news is if they came out of the building and said, "Oh, we're all set. We don't need tomorrow. We've hammered everything out." I find that to be unlikely since they got to this point here, which I was hoping was just going to be a formality, and it appears that it is nothing of the sort of a formality. I know, it's Michigan football. It's the news of the day. You knew this weekend was coming. You're hoping for the best. And we have to watch and see how it plays out. A lot of guesses about how things are going to go and where things are headed. I'm going to do my best to lay this out. I have found that talking about Stalions, Burgergate, sign stealing, it gets where you can fall off the topic pretty easy, and then after a while it just seems like you're listening, you don't even know what you're listening to. But I'll lay out what I have for you. I like to take the people's feedback, and I am going to do that. I'm going to go through what I see and what I know, 3 steps, and tell you and unload everything that I have, all the information that I have, and everything that I can tell you to get a clear view of what's happening, and then I will let you go ahead. I feel like I'm like the Michigan sending something to the Committee on Infractions. I will give my case, and then you are able to respond. And then if I like, we'll move on. We will see how that goes and how we can operate through it. So it would just be, if you like twists and drama, you got one this morning. I got one this morning where I knew that Michigan was going to be in Indy for these hearings. What I did not know is that the star of the Netflix sign stealing show, Connor Stalions, was also going to be in Indianapolis. And so that's a real treat for people who want to speculate about, what's Stalions doing there? I'm give you my thoughts on what I think Stalions is doing there. There is a thought that Sharon Moore could be in store for more games being suspended for this upcoming year. And I got to say, I know that this is one of the topics here that I felt that Michigan had a negotiated resolution. And today, like I said, it was just going to be a formality, and those 2 games were going to stick. But it doesn't appear that is necessarily going to be the case. And it could just be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4. We'll go through that as it goes. But we'll start with just the nuts and bolts of this, and that's Michigan being in Indianapolis for this hearing with the NCAA. Now, after these 2 days, the NCAA has 45 days in which they will make a ruling. And whatever that ruling is, then Michigan can look at it and say, all right, we are going to take what has been ruled on, and that's that, and we will move forward. Or they can appeal it, and I don't know what happens then. You go through a process of kicking it back to the NCAA or the COI, or if you bring somebody else in. It's unclear to me what happens there. But there's just like, I was going to say, like in real court proceedings. There's always an opportunity to appeal or sue or come back at them. And so that's the part that we don't know. If you want to say, well, yeah, they'll come out with a ruling in, a month and a half in, late, whatever you want to say, late July. And then right before the Big Ten coaches meetings. And then Michigan the ball will be in their court. Right now, the ball is being thrown back and forth. Then the ball is going to be in the NCAA's or the College of Infractions side of the court. And then when they rule, then they'll throw it back over to Michigan. And so that's where, after this hearing, we will wait on the ruling, and then we will get to whether or not there will be a delay or if this then is something that you will be able to move forward. Now, we already know that come fall that there's going to be, Michigan has imposed a 2-game suspension. Maybe it'll just be that. So it is still going to be talked about. And then we don't know about the recruiting restrictions, and we'll have to look through and parse through all of the different restrictions that will be put on U of M that we're guessing, that I would guess as well, that will be forthcoming. And then along with a fine that, hey, if you can just go ahead and, levy a fine and get some money, I would think that you would do that. So I think that also, I think we all agree, is forthcoming as well. So that's it. The hearing now and tomorrow, and then you have 45 days, and then U of M can accept, or they can, I guess, fight. I guess appeal, maybe it'd be the right word. And I am looking for the right word. Yeah, Michigan fans not happy right now with the NCAA. And, John saying it's exhausting. If I completely understand that, and I agree with you, there is a way. I've noticed that there's different ways that Michigan fans are handling this situation. One is that they're ignoring Ohio State fans and Michigan State fans. I don't know if they're staying offline, but they are ignoring, Michigan's rivals. Another thing that I've noticed is that they're laughing about this. Not that the situation is funny, but a Michigan fan is, thinking in the grand scheme, this is not a murder trial or, something like that, that's heinous. Michigan is going to survive this even though I've said a million times that it's very unpredictable about what the NCAA will do when it comes down to it. I still don't feel, as I'm talking right now, that there are going to be games vacated or that there will be a postseason ban. I feel like if either of those two things, that if there was going to be vacated games, if there was going to be a postseason ban, then in fact Michigan would do what a lot of people want Michigan to do, or wanted Michigan to do from the start, and that was to fight it, tooth and nail. But since this is just my thought, and a lot of you've seen a national folks like Pete Thamel from ESPN, he hasn't talked about any. And in fact, he says he doesn't think there's going to be games vacated. He doesn't think that there's going to be a postseason ban. And then locally, and I don't know, I can't speak for all the local Michigan media. I know that Josh Henschke, the publisher of the Maize and Blue Review, he has said on a number of occasions that from the people that he is speaking with, he doesn't expect that there's going to be any vacated games and postseason ban. And, those are the, two major things. And I know, again, getting back to if you're, listening to a Spartan fan or a Buckeye fan, like they feel like that's going to happen. Now, you might want to say, like, we wanted to fight that. We still want to fight it anyways. Well, maybe that would have come into play, but I don't know. I mean, your opinion is fine. If that's something that you have said all along, that, Michigan, I just wish they would have just been fighting this from Jump Street and not trying to negotiate anything, I understand that point of view. I don't agree with it myself, because I think this is going to be the best way to get the lightest sentence. Maybe it is now, if we can bring back real court proceedings into it. If you're faced with whatever it would be, I don't know, 20 years or nothing, or if you strike a plea, it's going to be probation, or maybe you have to go in. I don't know. Then heavy fine and probation. That sounds a lot better than 20 years. Maybe that's not the greatest comparison. That's how I feel right now about it. So there's point one, Michigan against the NCAA, hearing ongoing. We'll get that ruling over the next 45 days, and then we'll find out if Michigan accepts it or if there's going to be another delay where they kick it back, and then I'll have to wait and see what happens there, because I'm not 100%. So this was a big surprise. Connor Stalions in Indy, the focal point. Now, you could say, well, what is Connor Stalions doing in Indianapolis? I mean, he's not with Michigan. He was cooperating, but then he didn't cooperate. Then he had his Netflix thing and all of this. What I thought myself when I watched that Netflix show a year ago is that there were two things. I understand why lawyers say, don't say anything. They say lawyer up and don't say anything. That's not what Stalions did. He went and did a full Netflix show about his life and about how this all came about. But the two things that stood out in that Netflix show was that he didn't admit, and then he actually laughed about himself being on the sideline at Central Michigan. Well, I know, again, you're a Michigan fan, you can just laugh about that. And look, it's very drama filled and a pretty wild story, but him not admitting it when everyone knows that it was him was always something. And if he doesn't want to I don't know if there can be a lifetime show cause. I'm not sure. 20-year show clause, 10-year show clause. If Stalions is trying to do anything, if this is why he is there, so he can get cut down on that show cause, where it could be something where you'd think manageable, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where then, maybe one day he could go back and coach. He's not going to coach at Michigan, but maybe he would be able to get back into college. So maybe that's why he's going. And the first thing they're going to want to say, even though they know it, and I know it, and you know it, they're going to say, well, you should go ahead and admit that was you on the sideline up in Mount Pleasant when Michigan State was in town. And so, so they'll want him to admit that. That would be number one. The second thing that they would want him to admit was also something that he kind of laughed and made himself sound like he was, kind of outsmarting the NCAA. And that was, he didn't think that he broke that bylaw 11.61 about having in-person scouting, because he sent family members and friends. And remember, he said, I think it's an exact quote, they just enjoy football. That's why he was sending them tickets to these games. That is another thing that nobody believes. If their seats were, up on the end zone or something, but the seats were directly across from the sideline, and he paid for the tickets, and the NCAA will want him to say, yes, he bought the tickets for his family and friends, and he used that footage. That's what they'll want. Now, he doesn't really have to play dumb. What he can say, and he knows this is coming, and I'm sure he's talked about it with his lawyers, he could say he didn't really think he was breaking the rule. He thought, and this is what, and I've seen Michigan fans are like, no, he didn't break a rule. Paying for somebody to go and scout an opponent, they're not Michigan, even if he did pay him. And so I think that to me, it's always been a big, crux of the argument. However you want to look at it. If you're a Michigan fan, like, no, that's perfectly fine. And if you're everyone else, you're like, yeah, if you didn't pay anyone, it's different. If Connor Stalions' mom went up to East Lansing for a game and sat across the Michigan State bench and shot her ass off of the video of the sideline, and then sent it to her son, the big Michigan fan, and then he used that would have been fine. That's his mama, and she took her own initiative and went out there. The problem that everyone sees, I know there's, except some Michigan fans, because I guess I don't know what the court, how it actually follows. I know, again, I'm bringing some stupid comparisons in, but it's kind of like if you are sitting out at in the getaway car and you're the driver, and they come out with the bags of cash and everything, you drive away, and then they catch you. He's like, look, I didn't know what was going on. I was just driving. Stalion, to me, it seems that if you're, the distinction is, it would have been fine if his family and friends were sending him video tape of the signals, if he didn't pay him. The part that links them, or you can say that they're an extension of Michigan, is that you paid them. That's the big part. Now, again, maybe that can be argued, and maybe there's a case for that, and maybe you're a lawyer, or you say, you don't understand, and that's fine. I am saying that that part looks, what I would say, suspect, that part. So I don't know. There's some thought that Stalions could be, coughing up some info on Michigan to make him look bad, to try to clear his name. And I don't know. People are like, no, Connor's true blue, true maize and blue. Maybe he is. Up to this point, he has been. If there has been anything where that actually, he was, did tell some coaches or whatever else, he hasn't said anything like that. He hasn't implicated anybody else, just himself. This was him. And so, a lot of people say, well, he's true blue. He bleeds maize and blue. Yeah, he's a super fan. And, I tend to think he's doing exactly what I just said, the two things. He's going to admit that he was on the sideline, and that he will also say that, he paid, his family and friends to go to the games. They know that. And they also know that he was at Central, but he avoided both of those things, and that may help him ultimately with the show cause that's coming his way. I don't know. Anything else? Your guess is as good as mine on what he's going to do and why else he would be there. I don't know. So that's my guess on why he's there. All right, so number 3 that gets us to, and that's Sharon Moore. So more games for Sharon Moore, this possibility. Now, when the leak came out, whatever that was, a month or 2 ago, there was a thought that I was buying, that Michigan had talked to the NCAA, they had talked to the Committee on Infractions, and they understood that there wasn't going to be any games vacated. They understood that there wasn't going to be a postseason ban. And then it came down to, look, we'll suspend Moore 2 games, and that this weekend was going to be, again, like a formality. They'll just get in there, they'll meet, they'll have their fun little breakfast, they'll go through the proceedings, and then they'll just rubber stamp, and this thing will be over. But now that doesn't look like it's the case. What it looks like the case is that the NCAA wanted a lot more than 2 games. Now, whether it was 6 games and then Michigan offered up 2, and then it's an easy landing spot as 3, I'm not sure about that part. Hell, again, I thought that this was already a negotiated resolution and that the 2 games were just going to happen. Now, I wasn't quite sure that they were going to accept it being game 3 against CMU and game 4 against Nebraska. That always looked peculiar, because it was. I had never seen any, this whole thing is like that, but, it was weird that they were, but you understand, they wanted him to coach against Oklahoma. They wanted him there for the opener, and so they picked their 2 games. Again, I thought that this was negotiated. But now, so if it ends up being 3 games, so then you start thinking, all right, so right now it's, CMU and Nebraska. That was Michigan's offer. If it's 3 games, I would imagine that they would push it back to the beginning of the season, like we've seen in any other case where it's, 3 games. The opener against New Mexico, week 2 against Oklahoma, and then week 3 against CMU. And if it is that, sure, I don't know whether you say it's an embarrassment for Sharon Moore, for Michigan, it is what it is when it comes down to the suspension, and they're going to be talking about it anyways when it comes down there. And yeah, I'm sure Sharon Moore would rather go back to Norman as the head coach at Michigan, where he'd be on the sideline and not be sitting out the first 3 weeks of the season, but that possibility exists. The other one is that they're saying that, not say they, I've seen speculation already this morning, that it would be 4 games. Now, if it was 4, if they doubled up on Michigan's offering, and it ends up being 4 games, that's to me, this seems like a very big, as everything that sits around here, that would be a pretty big deal. There's the first 4 games, you're talking about 2, in my mind, of their 4 most difficult games, at Oklahoma and at Nebraska. I think Ohio State and at USC are their other 2. I think those are their 4 toughest games. Missing 2 of your 4 toughest games right out of the gate, suspended for the first month, can't coach on game day, can't be around the team all week. I don't know where he's going to go. Over to Hawaii for a month? To me, that would be pretty substantial. So that's the one where if they come back, where, maybe Michigan will do a little bit more fighting. 4 games? Are you kidding me? You don't like any of them. It gets out like you didn't want any games. Then it was like 2. It's like, are you kidding me? Now it's like, oh, maybe it'll be 3. It's like, that's a joke, but okay. New Mexico, OU, and Central Michigan. But 4 would really, feel like it would be punitive. But that's how it feels to me. I like to just speak for myself. Maybe you're sitting out there and saying, no, that's okay. As long as there's no vacated games, as long as there's no postseason ban. And like I talked about, when it comes to recruiting restrictions, the narrative seemed to be over the last 6 months or a year, it's like, it's NIL. Who cares? Michigan can just, say, look, your big bag of money is waiting here. Whenever you want it, you can have it. But you also understand that if you're in some of the bigger recruits and it comes down to 3 or 4 teams, and those other 3 teams are able to go and get an in-home visit with said recruit, and it's Miami, it's Georgia, it's Ohio State, and then Michigan can't come in to visit because they are not allowed to, because that's going to affect recruiting. I don't know how much. I'm not trying to be like negative about it. Oh, it's going to definitely hit them in recruiting. It could. The possibility is that it could. And then when it comes down to the fine, who knows how, they're not just going around the athletic department with a can saying, hey, can you go ahead and fill this up? Or, hey, can we take it out of you? No, they're going to pass that on to you. So, I don't know. It could be in a number of different ways. Certainly, they could just jack up ticket prices. They could send parking through. Hey, maybe memorabilia. I don't know. They got the alcohol sales. Maybe that was a preemptive. They were able to get, $2 million a game. It sounded like a crazy number, but that's what somebody told me that they were pulling in from the alcohol sales. Maybe they already, are sitting back with making $2 million a game from the alcohol sales, and they had, 12 million, just sitting back last, so, maybe with this year, they've already covered it just with beer. So maybe, I don't know when it comes to that. So that's where I'm at. That's what I see. And now I want to go through and I want to see what you have to say. And then I'll answer it to the best of my knowledge. And then we'll see what happens over this weekend if we know anything more about this situation in Indianapolis. That's it. And again, I don't, but if you're somebody that ignores it, It's understandable if you're somebody who just laughs it off, like it doesn't matter. Let's just, all these Buckeye, that's understandable too. If you're somebody that looks at all this and it just makes you sick and it's exhausting and you just can't, you just can't wait till it gets over. I think that's where most people are at. And then I think they use some of those first two points and see where it goes. Yeah, John, it's exhausting to him. Let's go. Brent taking the point where it doesn't matter that they can't save Ohio State from Michigan. I understand what you're saying there. Here's Garrison, who's talking about large fines, scholarship reductions, and suspensions. The worst is Moore getting a show cause for next season, repeat offender, which I would then ask why keep him, but even that's the worst. Yeah, a show cause, if you're saying, I haven't seen anybody, but look, I know Garrison runs an OSU pod, but he's, he seems like a pretty level-headed person. I haven't seen anybody suggesting that they would just take Moore and sideline him for the entire year. Like I said, the most that I've seen is 4, which seems pretty substantial to me, as I already said. So, this, and I'm not saying anybody's out of lines. Like in the circles that you run in, you might be seeing all kinds of crazy things. Yeah, Tim, going back to Garrison, who is talking about the deleting of text, recruiting violations, that makes him a repeat offender. He is a repeat offender, arguing about, what the suspensions are going to be, whether they're going to be too heavy or too, I don't know. You're right. I don't know about all of them. Tim, let's see if this is fun, watching two people go back and forth on the feedback about a potential penalty that we don't know about. Tim says, at the time the NCAA was investigating Stalions, Moore deleting a text isn't against any NCAA rules. This isn't CSI. They aren't the laws. They govern. Yeah, Tim, actually it is against the NCAA rules. When you have your university phone deleting text the same day that Connor Stalions is fired or resigns is what goes under the category of obstructing justice. It actually is against. Now, the thing that Michigan fans have said is that they've looked at those texts and there's nothing incriminating in those. What were we expecting? That he was going to be like, let me get those signs. Well, let's get up to Ohio State next week and get somebody in the stands and get those signs. Now, look, Kwame Kilpatrick was, he had his own mayor phone and he was talking with Christine Beatty and he was, saying all those kinds of things on his phone. So I don't know when it comes down to it. John is saying there's no hammer coming. A 4-game suspension is, everybody's view of a hammer is going to be, different. A hammer for a lot of Ohio State fans and Michigan State fans is going to be vacating some games. I mean, that would be as big as, Michigan State's never going to win anything, but that would be like winning a championship for Michigan State. So that hammer would just be something else. But Moore getting suspended 4 games, maybe not a hammer, but it does feel like a little rap on the head. What it feels like to me. Tim back talking about deleting text. He says, I would have suspended for deleting the text no matter what if I were Michigan, whether it linked him to Stalions or not. You have to ask the school if that's permissible. All right. Ben asking about vacating wins. No, I don't think. Yeah, again, I saw Pete Thamel, who if he was hearing about that, that would be his lead 23 title in jeopardy, says Pete Thamel. And that's not what he has said. He says he doesn't believe there's going to be games vacated. He doesn't believe there's going to be a postseason ban. I haven't seen anybody in the Michigan media think that there's going to be games vacated or a postseason ban. I always come back to say what I said at the beginning. And look, there's a lot of people that want a lot of answers. So, you've got to say something. But part of what I've said is that it's difficult. If you go and if you're somebody that is interested in following the Committee on Infractions and every case, people like, well, look at what Tennessee did and look at what Kansas happened in basketball. And, I get that looking through, but it's hard to predict. Even though you say, well, they didn't do this here, but look at over here. It's difficult. And a lot of times it comes down to you're sitting here. How contentious are you with the committee? And they've got to this point. It has been somewhat contentious. I'm not saying that they're that I think that they're going to vacate again. That's for the third or fourth time, but they weren't able to hammer out a negotiated resolution. So they're sitting there right now going, tit for tat on all of these things. And that can't be fun, for Michigan. Dave's is not deleting text a rule written down. Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, so whatever it's viewed on as not being, not necessarily hiding. Like I said, obstruction of justice is what I said, or deleting information of an investigation, and you don't have it. Even though that you should know that it's not deleting anything. It's deleting it off your phone, but if they want it, they can get it. So, more for Tim L. The NCAA is just going to pretend that we weren't already punished when Harbaugh had been suspended. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know. I don't have any clarity. I haven't heard anyone say anything, so it's not Harbaugh and more. It was just Harbaugh. But they got him in real time. All down through the years when I would see all the other schools go through it, and coach had moved on, he'd been to the pros or he'd been fired, then 3-4 years down the line, they're like, oh yeah, and the old coach so-and-so, and then everybody would complain, is why do anything to the kids currently? And it's like, well, you can't really get anybody inactive, but they got him in real time. And nothing is more substantial than those 3 games at Penn State. I mean, I could have coached them up all the way up to that Penn State game. Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, those 3 games, that was huge. I don't know how they look at it. The Big Ten, the NCAA, are they? I'm not sure. Michigan didn't agree to the suspension. Obviously, they fought it. So there you go. Hadley wasn't here at the beginning of the show. He's talking about, Jerry was not here. Jerry's opinion is on this has all along been like the NCAA has that Michigan just has done absolutely nothing wrong, and that the NCAA has a vendetta against Michigan, pretty much. And, he'll have his chance to talk. I'd like to speak for him. Ted is saying 4 games would be absurd, overreaching. That's the way I feel. 4 sounds way too much. Ted is exhausted. Here's Aaron having fun with free Connor Stalions. For people that don't know, I am not a Connor Stalions fan. That was, out of all the things, it would just been great if they didn't hire Connor Stalions. I think the lesson here is you got to watch super fans. I see it in the media, and it doesn't seem like there's much problem in the media, except, everybody's just kind of a super fan now. So if you actually have an objective opinion. People think you're like really negative or something because the vast majority of people that cover Michigan are all super fans and they're all just honking horns and agreeing with everything that Michigan says and all that, because that's what the fans want. And that's what the fans are going to get. And it gets people the most money. But somebody that might just have an objective opinion, they'll be looked at like, wow, you're super negative. And I'm like, no, you're just being objective, not negative. But when it comes to football and being on the staff, what a super fan would do, he's a fanatic. He could do stupid things. Just think if Stalions wasn't nabbed, if his computer didn't get hacked, which sucks, but it happened, what else was he going to do? And so it seemed like whatever he was doing, it was probably good that he got caught because it was escalating. I mean, he went from, how many people did he end up sending a game? 50 people that he was sending to Michigan's opponents to shoot video. That's a lot, but he was going to send more. And he was going down on the sidelines and dressing up in disguise. What was he going to do next? I don't know. You're involved in espionage. Who knows? I mean, he likes that little, the flair. Clandestine. Who knows what Connor Stalions is going to be? Connor Stalions was not good for Michigan. And Connor Stalions, people that pat him on the back or act like he's some kind of hero, I don't know. I get it. It's like, it's fun and it plays into the, Michigan versus everyone thing, but Stalions. Let's see. It's not justice. Is obstructing justice. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds stupid if you know that somebody's going to retrieve a text, why delete it, right? But you're not thinking in the moment. You're just like, oh my God, Stalions, boop, out of here. Get Ted. Ted three times in a row has come in here and he just dropped big bag. Ted. Thanks, Ted, for coming in here and talking Michigan, and you are appreciated. Yeah, that's the thing. You knew that. Mark just flying in here. See, this is the M in Mark's name, I believe. So you see the green background, probably Michigan State. Mark is calling for a 2-year bowl ban, and he wants 3 seasons vacated. 21, 22, 23. That's the Michigan State approach. Mark, anything can happen, but I don't think that particular dream scenario that you have is going to happen. Ferris has been one that has tried to have some fun with us. He has put a little bitty hammer on the emoji, and he's saying that is what's going to happen. 4 games are going to feel like that. Hammer, maybe like a pencil, somebody smacked it across my head or something like that. Tech star forever. Whew. Sometimes I have sat around and wondered, what would it be like for me if I had a cell phone and you had social media like it was in high school? I'd be in all kinds of TikToks with girls, and I'd be sliding into their DMs. I'd be texting them. I would be sitting around, and I think I'm happy. I do think it's easier. This is just purely as an aside. I think it would have been much easier to pick up girls, like find a girlfriend or something. We had to do it the old-fashioned way. You had to go up to someone, or you had to go to a bar, get somebody to throw a drink at. There wasn't any slide in anybody's DM and sending them a little wink emoji or whatever else. And there wasn't any dating sites, which also seems pretty easy as well. But I'm glad. I think it would have been easier. Okay. Honesty. Smash the Numbers is bringing in an honesty message here. He says, be honest. Did y'all not delete the text from the Nigerian prince who hoodwinked you out of your bank account routing number? You keep those around for fun. I think everyone at one point, even though they knew it was a ruse and, from somebody from Nigeria or something, you still were like, no, or you're communicated with them a little bit right up until the point where they're like, hey, could you go ahead and send me over some money? I mean, I sent a text or two back and forth, and that was about it. Then at the end, I was like, why don't you send me something? I don't have any money. A couple more here. We're just talking about erasing text. Aaron says, unless they have a memory erasing device and the guys in suits show up to clear the Rose Bowl from my mind, I don't care what the NCAA does. Memory erasing device. Yeah. Well, while I understand what you're saying, Aaron, because the game's already happened, a big part of moving forward, a big part always is being able to tell your rival to shove it. Being able to tell your rival, we beat you 4 years in a row. Being able to tell Michigan State, just laugh at them. It's a huge part. For some, it is everything. And so that part is huge to a lot of Michigan fans. And if you took a selection of 100 fans, I would think that there would be more than not who would consider going at a rival to be one of their main things that they love about their team. Not everyone, but I think the majority of people would. So while you say that, that's not how the majority of people think. Dave says the people need to quit the comparison to law. What they aren't doing isn't law. Yeah, and here I, made 2 examples, Dave, of doing that today, but you're right. Sharon was just sending Connor his sandwich order. Dave thinks that the NCAA is walking a collusion line. Well, I don't know what would be the case. They're colluding against Michigan because Michigan went against a antiquated bylaw, so they're going against Michigan. I don't know. Yeah, I don't see the collusion angle. What I do see is that the House settlement that was supposed to have happened already a month ago, and it still hasn't happened, and we talk about it like it is going to happen. So I don't know. I guess that's the way you have to talk about college football now. But when the House settled, this is like it when it comes down to the Committee on Infractions. They're kicking us to a new governing body. So this is the last of the big, I was going to call it a scandal situation. There'll be others that they'll have to deal with, but when the people that go through this hate it, and all the other fans, they love it, so, but, this looks like it's going to be it when it's coming down to that. So the NCAA, I don't see that particular part. Yeah, I don't know. People like, I've noticed, people love talking about the hammer. But if you do spend time online and you do interact with rivals, that's all they talk about. So I get it. That is, they are obsessed with the hammer is coming down. Like, this is Christmas. They have been waiting for, Michigan's really going to get it. So I get the references. Harbaugh got his in season because he's Harbaugh and they hate him. Yeah, I'm not going to argue that. I don't know who Sharon Moore's lawyer is. I don't know if it's Tom Mars. I don't know what this means, Douglas. You have to be a little bit more specific. But here we are. John making a point. Connor only did what all the other schools were and are doing. Urban Meyer said so himself. Yeah, that's always the thing. And then, but, Connor's computer got hacked. And then they saw that he was paying people to actually go to the games. And then they saw the footage. So even though everybody else, I don't disagree. And I remember actually Urban saying that, but I do think that other schools are doing it. But, Michigan got caught. Stalions got caught. Who was working for Michigan. So that's it. Ferris is talking about Stalions coaching Bryce Underwood in high school. He kept his Michigan loyalty through all of this. Kind of strange. Yeah, I didn't want Stalions anywhere near Bryce Underwood. I understand from a high school aspect, bringing him in. The other team's like, holy crap, they hired freaking Connor Stalions. I mean, so it would shake the other team up. If I was coaching a team this year and all of a sudden, they're like, hey, did you hear who Belleville hired? No. Stalions. Oh, no. Kind of the a big deal, when you think about that. Someone was obviously never in the military. What are you talking about, Douglas? You talking about somebody here? You talking about me? Let's do it. Let's see here. A couple more. Garrison. Yeah. As dumb of a rule it is, he's talking. There's not, it does happen. There's actually people that follow Ohio State that are, decent people. There's same thing with Michigan State. We just don't always run across them, especially shows like this. It's normally very hostile type things, right? OT likes, I know you like Connor. People do that. Let's see. Before the end of the show, we'd love to hear your thoughts about Charles Woodson Jr. being offered a scholarship. What have you heard behind the scenes about him? Behind the scenes, I don't know if this is behind the scenes, like I'm talking to somebody that has to do with recruiting or anything else, but I follow Charles Woodson, all of his accounts. And, I've seen him over the years, and I don't, thinking that Charles Woodson Jr. is going to be anything like Charles Woodson Sr. I just looked at his rating, which didn't look like it was very high, but also getting a legacy with the name Charles Woodson, so I think that if he wants to go to Michigan, he can probably get into Michigan. Yeah, I think Jerome Moore probably take him. I mean, what else is there? And then when it comes to any kind of resources and, having Charles Woodson around a little bit more around Michigan, he's already around quite a bit. He's going to be around for over on Main Street in a week or two. He's what he does for charity, all that great stuff. So, but about his kid as a player, I don't know how good it is, except I just look at the rating and it wasn't very high. That's what I know. Dre, can't wait till it's done. That's right. Are we going to talk about advanced scouting? Ferris wants to say it's a term that was never defined. Aren't head coaches sharing notes about a common opponents, also advanced scouting? I don't know, Ferris. When I look at bylaw 11.61, it says that you can't videotape an opponent in person. That is what advanced scouting. So this has to do nothing with a head coach. You can say, oh, well, the other head coach, if you were on Michigan's team and you were going to another team, the head coach, no, they are allowed to share. You see that distinction, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to explain that. is a little weird. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me, but I don't know. It doesn't to a lot of people. Maybe you could explain it more why another head coach of another team talking to Michigan, you would say that's advanced scouting. Well, the other head coach is not on Michigan's team. All right. So that's the distinction. So that's it. More from Tim. Unless the NCAA has proof, Michigan encouraged and financed the act of so-called in-person scouting, there shouldn't be a punishment, period. Well, yeah, that's a big part of it, that Stalions was financing this thing by himself. But they have no, nobody was giving Stalions money. And certainly, Michigan wasn't giving him the money. But apart that there shouldn't be any punishment, period. I mean, he was on the Michigan staff. And it used to be that you could do something by yourself and they'd say, "Oh, well, it's just this guy," but they changed the rule over the last so many years, saying, well, that the head coach actually, if you do something under the head coach, the head coach is liable just by being the head coach, and by extension, then Michigan. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not. What's up, Sam? We'll just keep reading them here. Let's just read them out here. Is the NCAA going to try to force something in order to win public opinion, knowing that they will lose in a court of battle, just so they can say we tried? This whole thing about, going out and some prolonged, court battle, if Michigan was fighting this, so Michigan has not fought it. Ward Manuel has self-imposed a suspension. They went off the road last. I know that was part of Burgergate, but they've tried to work with this a little bit. If they just were like, nope, we're not listening to any of that, and we're fighting them, the stakes would be a lot higher. Maybe they could have ended up getting off with nothing. They could have outlasted the NCAA, and nothing would have happened to Michigan. I know a lot of people wanted them to go that route, but there is the other side to that, where if you were fighting them, there actually might be a little bit more teeth to that hammer if Michigan did not follow the path that they're following. I don't know if that makes sense to people or not. Again, that gets back to whether if you make a plea agreement, you have to accept some things, and you got to take a little ruler on the hand or whatever. And it hurts, but not like, being punched in the face or having it drawn. Can you imagine? And I don't know how long the NCAA is going to be around, another 2-3 years. Could you imagine if this was another 2-3 years in the NCAA with their leaks and everything else that was coming out, actually what they were saying about Michigan? It could actually affect a lot of things. Oh, I don't know. I know a little bit of that. Let's see. Dave's talking. And Dave's here says the NCAA isn't restricted in punishing for not talking to them. So it isn't justice to start with. Also, organizations getting together to limit someone else's income is problematic. Yeah, I'm sorry, Dave. So it might just be where a lot of it's piling up to me where nothing's making sense anymore here at the end. Corrective action on what happened. Dave's, was he talking about Stalions? How can you limit how much a person can earn? Is that what we're talking about? I don't know. Are we talking about something else? I think we've gone off point there. The New Life says the rule is unenforceable. Anyone with a smartphone can do the same thing and would do it for free. Yeah, but that's not what happened. In fact, the rule is going to be enforceable because there was evidence on a computer charted out. Hey, here's the video from Aunt Sue at Purdue. And here's the money out of my account that I paid Aunt Sue to go to Purdue. Now, if Aunt Sue sent her next door neighbor who had a smartphone and there was no trace of them paying for her to go there, you're exactly right. But this rule is absolutely enforceable because they have the evidence. It's right on his computer. That's the thing. Yeah, it's weird that the rule, I mean, the rule really didn't apply because they didn't even know what a smartphone was. And that's the thing. It's never, I make it sound like it was just, it was smart. I don't want to say right up until, Stalions got caught or his computer got hacked. It was smart right up until he just was paying people. I mean, working around, Stalions, he wasn't, tweeting out that he was sending his Aunt Sue, down to Ohio State. So he knew that there was a bylaw. He just thought, hey, just step around. It was just smart. It was smart until the part where he paid somebody. And it wasn't smart. Talking about, I don't know what that is. Again, Dave's, I'm missing it. Oh, OT's talking about Woodson Jr. is a 4-star. Yeah, OT, I was looking at Rivals and he was a 3. So if he's a 4-star, hey, look, if he's got potential and he's a good player in, I could see, not just Woodson's still very active with Michigan. I can see him coming to Michigan. Absolutely. So there you go. Ted's saying the same things. He's a great prospect, one of the best prospects in Florida. Well, there you go. So Michigan will have a good chance to get him. Hard enough knowing where a 26 is going to go, but yeah, having the name Charles Woodson Jr., thinking about playing defensive back at Michigan. I hear somebody else saying he's a 4-star. Well, let me just go ahead. The New Life, I guess I'm just going to have to type it in because sometimes you do something and you think it's like this new episode of The Black Mirror where the lady is like, no, that chicken place was called Ralph's, not something else. And then they're like, no, well, this lady was changing everything on her. Charles Woodson Jr., Rivals.com for 27. Here he is listed. He's taking me a little time though. Talks new Michigan offer. Oh, on Rivals. Nice. Let's see what we have here. Well, this is what I came up with when I said that he was a 3-star. When I typed in Rivals, it had him listed as a 3-star. So I don't know. Maybe you guys are looking at a composite of all the rankings, which I've learned that I have to do. Well, I work for Rivals.com, but I know all of you, when you go, hey, where's you guys look at the rankings a little bit different. Just looking at Rivals, look at other things. At least initially, he's looked at as a 3-star. All right, more. The New Life. The advanced scouting rule was written in 94. Before the smartphone existed, it was written to protect smaller programs with less resources. They considered removing the rule around 5 years ago. That is all true. You're exactly right. The New Life. And will Michigan argue that this rule, that if they argue that, okay, Stalions broke the rule, but actually this rule shouldn't even be on the bus. I mean, maybe that's a good argument. I could be. I'll give you that. But also, couldn't you see? I think there's a lot of Michigan fans that don't see this. And you get the all 22, and once in a while, or you're watching the TV copy, they flash down, and then you'll see some of the signs that are over there. And okay, yeah, you can stop and you can go through it all. But if you had someone that went to a game and taped, just trained their phone on the signs, and you had the ability to see them all, not just when the TV might happen to see something over on the sideline, but you got the entire copy of all game long. And you could then look at the game copy and then look at and don't you think that could help you? I don't know how much it helped on the field. Like, so, no, me trying to tell, I don't know. You don't know either. For people that's, anytime I hear people, it's a real tell, say that absolutely it helped or absolutely it didn't, they don't know that. I don't know that. Either do you. But I could see how, even though they wrote the rule for something else, that it was still a good rule. Well, what it would be a real kicker is if that, whatever they do with Michigan in the next year, they say, oh, we're done with this rule. Now, I have to admit that would be, that would get people upset. Who will have a parade first, the Tigers or the Lions? I'm going to go with the Tigers this year. Hacking a computer is a felony. There's no doubt about it. And that is a weird part of this. But the person that actually, the New Life, whoever it did hack the computer, that's the person that's in trouble. That the information is out there and the NCAA can now look at it and say, oh, Stalions was paying his family members. It's all right here. They don't say, oh, we can't look at any of that because somebody illegally. It seems like it should be. You get, how many times have I watch Cops or something on the phone, and they're like, you can't look in my trunk. Or if they pop the trunk and they find, 100 kilos of coke, and then the argument is like, they shouldn't, there was an illegal search. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I get that part, that the hacking was, but the NCAA didn't hack it. Probably somebody that likes Michigan State or Ohio State are the ones that hacked it. Probably. Sources. From what you've heard, how nervous is Michigan about the upcoming ruling from the NCAA? Well, from what I can gather, I thought, so when I talk with someone who I find to be had pretty good information, this is off. These are just people that I talk with, my own sources. He made it sound pretty much like this was going to be a negotiated resolution, and this weekend was pretty much a formality. And as we got within 48 hours, you started hearing people say things like, oh, there's going to be a little bit more for Sharon, that in the last 24 hours. In fact, you say, oh, no, it's going to be more than 2 games. To me, that doesn't sound like a negotiated resolution and everything is all hunky-dory and everything was fine. This sounds like they're in Indianapolis and the contentiousness is continuing. And this is not just some agreeable meeting where like, okay, that they're fighting on all of these different points. Maybe like, the New Life. Maybe Michigan's like, they hacked this computer, you guys. And, all of the other different things. This is an antiquated rule. Maybe they're fighting tooth and nail about the hack, about that this rule is stupid or it shouldn't have been on the rule, and that you're applying an old rule to something new, and everybody else is doing. Maybe all those things are the things that are being argued right now, as we talk right now. Do. I don't know what we're here. That. Thanks, Ferris. I didn't know about this rule, and I've gone to the very final point. Do we know who hacked Stalions' computer? Day's brother's PI firm. That's what people thought right off the bat, and but there has not been. There's been a couple things behind the scenes that are actually still going on, where Michigan people are trying to flesh out some different things from Ohio State, and they were trying to get, and I would think that they would have been trying to get this information out before this, before this hearing today, and that would have been where, oh, hey, Ohio State's got a bunch of sideline tape too, and oh, here's Ohio State, like there's their computers. But since that information, that information would have been a lot more useful before today, and afterwards, it's still useful, but not as useful. But I don't know. The Day's brother, which was really juicy, and everybody wanted that to be true, there ended up being roadblocks on that. So let's just put this into a nice, neat, and put a bow on this. I could have just come out and done a 2-minute show. U of M currently in Indianapolis for the College Committee on Infraction hearings. And with those, there is the hearing. They will make a ruling within 45 days, and then Michigan will either accept or we will go to another phase of where they can dispute that. And I don't exactly know what happens if Michigan wants to fight back with I don't know what their recourse is there, but another delay potentially. It was Connor Stalions. That was the big news. What's he doing there? What's he saying? What's his involvement? Is this helping Michigan? Is it possibly could hurt it? He's a loyal follower of the Maize and Blue, so probably not, but who knows? But that was definitely an interesting wrinkle. And then finally, the idea that Sharon Moore might get more games than just the 2. And if it's more than 2, then you hope that it's the first 3, and it's not the CMU. It's not the OU CMU Nebraska game. That would be, just like having 4. And if it's 4, and if it's the first 4, that would feel like a little thump on the head. So 3, if it's New Mexico, OU, and CMU, you don't like it. You don't like any of it. You don't like the 2 games, but kind of sitting here feeling like it was that they're just pushing for more suspension when that wasn't the case. All right, we got one last one here. The guy from Buckeye Sky, I haven't followed much of that. I hear people complaining about what's going on. The New Life, who's obviously all over this because he's got this information. He wants to know about Ohio, and does mean Ohio State. Michigan fan calling Ohio State, Ohio. I love it. Was it okay for Ohio and Rutgers to give Purdue Michigan sideline video prior to the Big Ten championship game a few years ago? That's collusion, which is much worse, in my opinion, to what Stalions did. Yeah, I remember how that all went down. Coaches, how they can. So I don't really. Was it okay? It doesn't sound okay, New Life. I don't even know what the argument is about that. They didn't shoot it in. They just have the video. They shot the sideline of it, or they have their own information from of the signs, and they shared that because coaches share things. I don't know. I'm at the actual particulars of that. I'm not sure of, although people do talk about that. I'm not saying that I've never heard about that. That was talked about quite a bit. I just don't think it was. I don't exactly know, how that ended up working out. Don't you think Ohio State getting the news and leaks ahead of other news sources that they had someone involved in the investigation? I don't know. You never know, who's somebody's leaking it out, who has a tie to Ohio State. I would say not necessarily. I do see there's probably a lot of other shows that nitpick, and I'm not saying nitpicking's wrong. If there's something there about Ohio State and Rutgers, forwarding some film and sharing the notes. I saw all of that. What's the difference between the coaches doing it and then actually sending people to shoot in person? I don't know the distinction on that. So, sorry, that kind of thing. And then Ferris coming back to his point about the other coaches. Is that what he was? Is that the point that he was making? So there you go. All right. That is going to do it. Much more on the Maize and Blue Review. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend. We will talk with you on Monday. So long, everyone.